Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello, and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 186. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another co-hosted episode with the fabulous Joe Casey. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about why following the internet rock stars is ruining your business. Yes, that sounds very grim. And yes, it can be helpful for new entrepreneurs to follow some of the bigger names in business so you can get an idea of what's possible in the world of online business. But it can also hurt you. And in this episode, we're going to talk about why we think that's so. So what are you going to learn today? You're going to learn what makes an online business rock star, the elements that make them stand out from the crowd. We're going to talk about why you need to choose the business model for where you're at, not where the rock stars are at. We're going to talk about the 3 foundation pieces that you need to make big things happen in your business. We're going to talk about how to bring in money while you're putting those foundation bits into place. And finally, we're going to talk about why resilience is so important in the online world. So hope you find this interesting and useful. I think this is something that we've been kind of thinking about for a while and finally decided to do an episode on it. We're going to talk about all kinds of exciting things, business rockstar related, and how that serves you and how it doesn't. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, it's Holly Wharton, and I'm back with Joe Casey for another co-hosted episode. We're going to be talking about why following the internet rock stars is ruining your business. This is something that Joe has been super passionate about. She's been working on a blog post on, so that's going to kind of be a companion to this episode. So I think this is a really interesting topic because following the internet rock stars can be useful because it helps you kind of get an idea of where you can be headed in your business in the future. But it can also be detrimental because it can be really depressing to see all these people who are doing these amazing things and they do this launch and they get like thousands of people, and it can lead to you thinking as a new business owner that this is the norm, when actually it's the exception. So Joe, tell us a little bit about what your thoughts have been around this, because I know this is something that you've been kind of thinking about for a while and something you've been dealing with your clients in terms of people thinking that they can just do a challenge or launch a thing and get like amazing results.
Yeah, I think we've probably all been through this, and being one of the dinosaurs of the internet now, having been on it like 4 or 5 years now, you go through these phases in your business, and one of the things that I always say is I want to save people from the mistakes that I made. So that's just to caveat this and say I'm saying all of this with love and because I've been there. But please stop looking at Amy Porterfield and John Lee Dumas and, all of those kind of big internet rock stars who have multiple 6- and 7-figure businesses and comparing your business to theirs. Because what I find is that the way that you build a business is very different at different stages. You need different business models at different stages. And one of the things that I'm seeing happening repeatedly is people who are just starting out, who then decide that they're going to do something because they've seen one of the kind of big rock stars do it, and it falls flat because they don't realize that it's a different model. So I'll give you an example. So you and I have recently run a challenge, and it's been really successful from our perspective. But there was a time when I would have thought the numbers that we had for that were like really disappointing. Because we had, I don't know, around about 100 people sign up for. But between you and I, we have an audience of a kind of a list size of a couple of thousand.
Yeah.
And it's taken a number of years to build up to that level. And so at our level, if a challenge for us, and okay, we didn't put lots into Facebook ads because we both pretty much hate Facebook ads at this stage. We did do it kind of organically and word of mouth, but we still had to put quite a lot of work in to get those 100 people on board. And then you have quite a lot of work when you do it. So it's not like it was an easy thing. I just send up one email and it just suddenly fills up.
No. And this is something that we've been planning, and I think it's important to say we've been planning it since, November?
October. I was looking at our list and kind of go, wow, did we really start planning this in October? So it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
So I've recently known somebody who's just starting out in their business, was putting all of their kind of foundational pieces in place. And then because she's in a number of different entrepreneurial Facebook groups, somebody had said, oh my God, you should totally do a challenge. My friend did one. She got 300 people on it. So this person then deviated from all of those foundational pieces that she was doing and was starting to work with her very beginning baby business and put a ton of work into launching a challenge. I mean, she's done so much stuff, but so far, and this is after weeks and weeks of trying to promote it and things like that, she's not had anybody sign up. And she's devastated because it's really, really disappointing. But, had she had a slightly more realistic view of how it works. And I always say I walk this line between, I really want to be a cheerleader for people, but I also want to save them a lot of the kind of the hard work and stuff. Then, I'd have probably said to her, don't do that, or maybe do it in a slightly different way, or, because there's lots and lots of moving parts. And I think we don't talk about the kind of the realistic expectations of what you can expect from launching a group program, or when you should launch a group program. We've talked about that, but also I think there's a real lack of those tales of internet reality. We are saturated with sales of 6-figure launches, and I got 1,000 people into my group. But what we don't hear about, on very rare occasions, are the times when people launched something and there was crickets, or when you had to give the refunds because you only had 2 people sign up, or when you do the webinar and there's no one on it, but you do it anyway. And you and I had been talking about this the other day and realised that, we have experiences of that. We know on our peer group, everyone's had experiences like that. But I think that's something that people need to hear a bit more of. Partly because... go on.
No, sorry, I was just going to say partly because people aren't talking about it that much. I mean, when I have a one-to-one chat with friends, sometimes these things will come up. But it's like I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about their failures because what if I look like a failure myself? What if because I'm feeding energy into talking about this, I attract more failures? But I don't think it's failure. I think it's just learning. Like, what can I learn from this experience so I can do it differently next time? What was it that contributed to me getting no people on my challenge or no people on my webinar? And how can I, avoid that the next time?
Yeah. So there's that kind of really useful feedback about, okay, so what do I need to tweak about my strategy or my message or, whatever that was. But also I think that type of stuff builds resilience because it's those moments when you just go, oh my God, I'm such a failure. It's a disaster. And it's then, can you pick yourself up the next day and start again? And I think that's the real test of whether you can do the entrepreneurial stuff. You still get to feel crap about it. Yeah. But can you pick yourself up? Or do you go into, blaming everybody? Why did nobody warn me about this? Or I'm so rubbish. I'm just not cut out for this. But actually, this is part of the journey. This is,
because that's how you learn.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this word that you've used, and I know this is a word that you have used a lot in your business, but I don't think it's heard enough in the online business world, resilience.
Yeah.
So tell us about what is resilience? I mean, we know what the word means, but what does it mean in the terms of the online business world? Why do we need it? And why is it so important?
Well, resilience, the dictionary definition of resilience, and by the way, this is nerd alert, people, because for many years, I'm still, when I go and do kind of corporate work, I'm introduced as a resilience expert. So just a warning there. Holly, I'm leaving it in your hands to just go, okay, Joe, enough. So the dictionary definition of resilience is It comes from physics or mechanics or one of those. So it's the way where a structure or an object can be put under pressure and then return to the same shape afterwards when that pressure is alleviated. In human terms, what we're talking about is, do you have the ability to pick yourself up from failures, to carry on functioning and staying well through pressure, through stresses, through ups and downs, through life, basically? And also, are you able to take a healthy amount of risk? Because, and I'm talking a healthy amount. I'm not saying, I'm going to I'm going to remortgage my house and spend the money on Facebook ads because I know it will pay off. I'm not talking about that type of stuff. But the risk of, say, putting yourself out there, even though you may fail, because you're resilient enough to be able to pick yourself up afterwards if it goes wrong.
And I think that's something that's really, really important, because if you're new to business and if you're new to online business, there's so many learning points where you feel like they're failures and you feel like absolute crap because you've had the webinar where you sat there alone. I mean, I remember, when was this? It must have been a couple of years ago. I ran a series of webinars. So it was like the same webinar, but at different times of the day and different days of the week, that kind of thing. So I think I did it like a morning one, an afternoon one, an evening one. And so I'd run it a couple of times and I had recordings of, I think, the first two. The third one, which I think was an evening one, no one showed up for. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to start the webinar and start delivering it because I know that sometimes people show up late. So I started delivering the webinar. For the first 15 minutes, I delivered the webinar like there were people there. And there was no one there. And my standard kind of waiting for people, whether it's a meeting, a call, is 15 minutes. So if someone doesn't show up after 15 minutes, my standard thing is to just send a message, say, I hope everything's okay. I hope you haven't had like an emergency. I'm leaving. So I just silently ended the webinar and just went on and had a bath because that's what I needed. And I figured I've got the recording. So people who signed up for this webinar, I can send them the recording from a previous one, but I'm not going to sit through and do an hour webinar on my own. And I felt awful about it. Yeah. But, like I said, I'd had 2 other webinars previously in the week that people had shown up for. And so I just used the recording from those and went on with my day.
Yeah, you have to be able to do that stuff, because the other option is, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to do this anymore.
No, yeah, that didn't even occur to me.
I was going to say, it still occurs to me fairly regularly when I have those things. But yeah, I've done webinars like that before as well. I launched my first group program and only 2 people signed up. And I had to go back to those 2 people and kind of go, it's not actually going to work in the same way. But what I did is I went back to those people, even though I felt so embarrassed that I hadn't been able to fill this program. I went back and said, look, for the same price, because I was doing it as a beta at the time, how about, we do the sessions, but we do them one-on-one.
Yeah.
And so even though in some ways it was twice the work because I did twice the number of sessions, actually the benefit that those people got was amazing. Both of them went on and became huge champions of my work and kind of full paying clients later on. But at the time, it took so much courage to go back and admit that it's not filled. I can't run the group program. It felt horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible.
Yeah, because it's like public shame, because now people know that there are only 2 people signed up, rather than like you can't hide it.
Exactly. What has been really enlightening as I've kind of continued on this journey is, I do get to talk to people who are, peers or have been in the industry longer or are further ahead in their businesses, and they all have similar stories. I remember talking to a really high-profile coach who has an enormous mailing list and, hundreds of thousands of Facebook likes on her page and things like that. And she said that she had launched a program the year before when she still had thousands and thousands of people on her list, and it was a flop. She didn't fill it and she had to cancel it.
Wow. Well, and I think another interesting thing, and she's been very public about this, so I feel like it's okay to say it. Leonie Dawson, who is huge, has just canceled her live event in Australia that she was going to be running, I think, in a couple of months, because she only had, I think, 25 people sign up for it, and she needed at least 100 people to cover the costs. And she's got a massive list. Yeah. Massive list. And this is not the first time she's run this live event. She ran it last year, and it was amazing. People got amazing results from it. People were raving about it. So, some things are tricky. Live events can be tricky because you've got to get people traveling to your place. And sometimes not even people with a massive list. I mean, I don't know. She's got to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people on her list, and, didn't make it happen. So
I love the fact that she shared that story.
Yes,
because I do think it's part of the reality and what we need to be hearing, because otherwise there is so much shame that's around, and also a lot of the kind of the marketing that happens online is very shame based. So it's all about making you feel bad, and the way to feel better is to buy their thing.
Yeah.
And, the people selling to the online coaching and entrepreneur industry use that as well. There are lots and lots of good guys out there, but there are an awful lot of people who are using this. If you really want to invest in your business, then you have to be able to spend the $30,000. If you're really serious, if you want to be a success, then you need to do this. And so already shame is a real kind of powerful currency that is used online. And I just think we need a healthy dose of reality to be able to say to people, there is no shame in launching something and it's failing. Actually, that's the definition of being an entrepreneur.
Yes. Doing it over and over again and picking yourself up and trying something different. Yeah. Not doing the exact same thing next time, because if you're going to learn from the experience, that means you need to figure out what went wrong and try something new. And then do something differently and see what works. It's trial and error.
It is. These tales of what appears to be really easy success, because, with in all credit to people like Amy Porterfield and John Lee Dumas, theirs wasn't an overnight success either. They have been working their arses off for years to do this. And now they have the huge platform. I remember talking to Mark Mulwiney, who has the Natural Born Coaches podcast. And he now has a very healthy, I believe, 6-figure coaching business. But when he started out, he was doing his podcast every day. So it was a daily podcast for about 2 years, which I can't even imagine. But I
can't imagine that either.
And I said to him, how long were you doing the podcast before you got your first client? And he said, I think it was 5 months. It was definitely months rather than weeks. And I think he'd been in real estate before, and he said, I had many moments of saying to myself, gee, this coaching business is a lot harder than I'd been led to believe. But he kept going with that, and he built this, enormous platform, a bit like John Lee Dumas did. He was somebody else who started saying, I'm going to do a daily podcast, and people thought it was crazy. It takes an enormous amount of work to do that. Yeah. And it paid off for him because he was one of the first people doing it. And now if you do a daily podcast, it's going to be that bit tougher because you're not the first in the industry. So again, is that the best model for you? Most of the people I work with, their biggest priority is, I need to be bringing some income in. I want to be earning some income with my business. In all honesty, launching a group program when you have no list and no community around you yet, and you don't have a strong message, and you don't yet know how to stand out in the market, that's going to be a huge amount of work for very little reward. So would it be beneficial to talk about maybe what some of the things that we think people should do? Because I think it's really important to realise that there are different business models work for different businesses and different stages of business.
Yes, definitely.
So somebody with a huge audience can put out a sales page, put out a few emails, and fill a program.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to, I know we discussed this a little bit before we got on the actual recording of this, is what are some of the things that these high profile people have that makes it easy for them that we or our listeners as kind of smaller business owners do not have or are still developing or are in the process of kind of working on. So as you've said, they've got a different business model because they've got this massive platform. How did they get that massive platform? I think part of it, as we've discussed, is a lot of these people have really strong personalities. They've got a clear message, a strong message, and they're not afraid to stand out. So if we think about people like Leonie Dawson, she's got a very strong personality. She's very different. She's very unique. She's got Asperger's, as do I, but as I'm still kind of trying to figure out, who I am and being me and expressing my weird quirks. She's been expressing her weird Aspie quirks for years, which is very endearing to some people. Some people love that. And, she's like Marmite. You either love her or you hate her. The same goes for people like Kat Laterzo. What are some other names, people that you can think of that are like really strong personalities?
I think for Beku Fantamise, who is fabulous in every way, but has a very strong personality. Yeah. He is the type of person, we were talking about this before we started recording, that he can put something out to his Facebook community and just say, I'm launching this, it's going to be X amount, here's the link to sign up, and he will fill that without doing any other promo, because people either love him or they hate him. If they love him, they become kind of, super fans. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not just having a large personality. He's also really, really good at what he does, as is, Leonie Dawson. But there is something about, he's not afraid to stand out. He is who he is. You know what you're getting. He's really clear about, what the benefits are of working with him and, who the right fit is for his programs and who isn't.
And he's got a super clear message.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest battles that you have when you're first starting out is how do you get that really clear message about what you stand for? Because, it's scary taking a stand on something.
Yeah, it is. It is. And moving on from that, since you've kind of transitioned, I think this is the perfect time to talk about what are the foundation pieces you need in order to kind of start, expecting bigger results and building up to eventually, if that's your one of your business goals, becoming one of the internet rock stars. You've got to have a super clear message. And I know for me, that's taken a really long time to develop. And I think I'm still not 100% there. I feel like last year was a big year of clarity for me in what my message is in terms of helping women entrepreneurs clear their fears, blocks, and stuff that are holding them back from achieving their business goals. But oh my God, that took me like a year to figure that out. A year of working with people, a year of reading their intake forms and seeing, what the heck results people were getting from me and how I help people. It's really hard to articulate. I mean, how was it for you getting your message?
Same. It's evolving. I can remember those, the first kind of couple of years online, just kind of thinking, I don't know what it is. I don't know where it is. Now what's really interesting is I'm going through a bit of a not a rebrand, but kind of upgrading my messaging, I think, is my message actually is going to be pulling together all of the work that I've done, all of the things that have led me up to this point. It's almost like I'm properly stepping into myself and shedding this kind of, almost like a bit of a mask that I think we sometimes have to put on. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty, what you see is what you get when you're with me. But in terms of the work that I do and the message that I have, it's evolving into something that is even more aligned. So it's like an onion. I think, it's an iteration process.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something you get from expressing yourself, whether it's through podcasts or blog posts or videos, and talking about what you do and working with clients. It's not something that you're going to nail, probably, I think for 99% of the people on, day one, month one, week, of your business. It really takes time to get clear on what that message is. So I think that's the really first important thing. Next thing is solving your visibility crap. We're talking about these people with big personalities that aren't afraid to stand out. Well, a lot of coaches and online business owners are afraid to stand out. That, for me, was one of my biggest things that held me back in my business for so many years. And that's why I wrote one of my books on business visibility, because you've got to figure out what your particular visibility fears are and clear them so that you can make it easier for you to get yourself out there. How has visibility been for you, Jo?
Oh, agonizing. Absolutely agonizing. I think it is for the majority of women. And I think the reason for that is because to have a great business, to have a good business, a successful business, you need to be able to stand out and take up space and have opinions and be seen. Mm-hmm. And yet to be a good woman, which what we've been led is to smooth things over, to not make a fuss, to not take up too much space, to not be too loud. So it kind of goes against all of our feminine conditioning, which is the phrase that I use for it. So I think in order to be visible, whether that be, even in the traditional workplace, it requires you to almost violate that feminine conditioning. And so stuff is going to come up. It is going to be. So if you don't have tools or some kind of support in your corner when that happens, because it absolutely will, you're going to just freeze and you're going to just want to hide. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's inevitable. So yeah, absolutely being able to deal with that visibility question, that tension is vital.
Yes, it's absolutely vital. And these are kind of the two pieces, having that clear message and solving your visibility stuff so that you can get out there and stand out from the crowd. Yeah. That's what's going to lead to the third point, which is building a thriving community online and or a list where you can connect with these people who are interested in who you are and what you do and, in working with you. But it takes time and or money to build this. But you've got to really have that clear message, be not afraid to get out there and put yourself out there so that you can build this community.
Absolutely. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes for people because building a list, building a community does take time. And you do need those pieces in place first. So the question then is, well, how do I make income while I'm doing that? So you make income by focusing on doing the work. Mm-hmm. So, for me, particularly working with coaches and healers and women entrepreneurs, it's about making human connections, whether that be online or face-to-face, and focusing on filling your kind of one-on-one practice. Yeah. And as you're doing the visibility stuff, as you're doing that kind of list building stuff, because that will take more time and you need to be bringing in income while you're doing it. Plus, while you're doing the work, while you're filling your one-on-one practice, that gives you so much more insight into who you love working with, which in turn will help with your messaging, which in turn will help with what products you want to and services you want to create further along the line. But, going back to that, if you don't have those first two pieces in place, you're not going to be able to do any of it. So it all fits together. The problem that I see time and time again is people jump to the whole kind of, I'm going to launch a group program or I'm going to do some list building, but they don't know who their audience is. They don't know what their message is. And so, it's really hard work for very, very little reward, which is kind of sad. It makes me kind of weep a little bit inside because I want to, save people from doing that. I honestly believe you can make a really good sustainable business first year out the gate if you focus on the right things. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But if you expect that you're going to be making kind of six figures or have 10,000 people on your email list, unless you have $10,000 to throw at Facebook ads, you're going to be really disappointed. And I think that's a real put attention in our industry. And even then, there are no guarantees. I mean, it takes time to figure out Facebook ads. I have done tons of training in Facebook ads. My area of expertise used to be social media marketing. I still haven't cracked Facebook ads. You've got to have the right opt-in for your tribe. And that takes time. You've got to figure out your message. You've got to figure out your community. And you've got to have the right opt-in, you've got to have the right sales page, you've got to have the right ad copy, the right ad image. Like, there's so many elements that go into cracking Facebook ads so that they work for you. So even if you throw $10,000 at Facebook ads, that's not guaranteed to work. No. So in summary, to wrapping all this up, how are you feeling now about
how we've presented the case for why following the internet rock stars is ruining your business.
I hope, I come back to this dilemma. I want you to really hear me if you listen to this and say it's absolutely possible to build a really good, sustainable business. It's absolutely possible to build a multiple six-figure business online. I know people who've done it. I'm on the way to doing it myself. Absolutely, it's possible. But you need to have those first pieces in place first. And, I know I would say this, but working with somebody, working with a coach, working with a business coach, working with somebody who's going to be able to help you with all that will absolutely accelerate your process and also help you to be able to focus down on what is going to work for you at this stage in your business rather than jumping 17 steps ahead and following something that, maybe John Lee Dumas has been doing or Liam Neeson Dawson has been doing because you're not in the same circumstances. I really want you to have this balance. Save yourself the time and the extra work and the, some of the disappointment and the heartache and just go into this with open eyes and also go into it knowing you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And be okay with that. I'm not saying you have to like it.
Yeah.
Because none of us do.
But take advantage of those failures and take the learning points from it rather than just, being angry and sad and depressed. Make it into a learning experience. And also I think it can be useful to listen to people's kind of stories of growth. A lot of the online rock stars will tell stories about how they grew and talk about their failures and mistakes and things. And I think that's really useful to learn from too, how they became who they are. I mean, I was just recently listening to the Making Oprah podcast, which was, have you listened to that?
I loved it. Yes.
Oh, I loved it so much. It was so great. It talked about from the very first moments of when she, went for her audition to the beginnings of her show to how she got to where she is today. It was fantastic because it teaches you. I mean, you see her now and you're like, oh my God, she's amazing. She's huge. But how did she get there? And that podcast tells the story. I think it's really great. Yeah. So the more you can hear these stories of how people, and it also talks about her failures and the mistakes that she made along the way. So that's really, really useful because you can see how these people have had the ups and downs of where they were in the beginning to where they are now. So hearing stories like that, I think can also be really helpful.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I love that podcast. For sure.
So I think it's about time for us to wrap up this episode. I hope our listeners have found this useful. I think we've been specific in talking about, some of the foundation pieces that you need in place in order to get to where you want to be. It's not always detrimental to be following these internet rock stars, but if you're not following them with the right perspective, I think it can be painful and difficult and not necessarily useful to your business. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Joe, for exploring this topic with me. And we will be back next month for our next co-hosted episode. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/186 for the show notes on this episode.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.